I referenced an exhibit by Mr. John Charkovsky, the director of photography at the Museum of Modern Art from 1964. It was entitled The Photographer's Eye. And along with the vantage point and a number of other elements, he addressed something that's equally critical to us as photographers, and that is the idea of the frame. The idea that our picture has a particular frame and edge to it. So let's get started talking about that. The frame is the borderline. It's the line of demarcation. What's in your picture, what's not in your picture. That edge of the photograph, that's one of the first decisions that you'll have to make as a photographer in finalizing your picture and saying, okay, it's done, I've got that edge. I always talk to my students about how much I kind of despise my friends who are painters, because they can take a little 2x2 foot canvas and paint the entire universe in that. The frame to them is just whatever they want to put in it. Whereas for photographers, we've got to deal with what that frame of our camera at that particular moment, with that particular lens, that particular sensor size, what that will allow us to show. And a decision about what we're going to allow to fall within the frame affects not only the ultimate content of the picture, but also its success or its failure as a composition, as an arrangement of visual elements. So where you place that line, that decision is going to impact content and it's going to impact composition. In this photograph, you'll see a black line that surrounds the picture. And this was a signal to the viewer that the full frame of the 35mm film negative was printed. No cropping, nothing was cut out, nothing was added. The edges that you see here, these black lines, were created by light passing through the film to create that black image on the photo paper. And it's something that's very important stylistically and content-wise for me as a photographer in making this picture. In this first set of photographs, I'm going to show you pictures that I made at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Athens, Greece. And 24 hours, 7 days a week, there's an honor guard that protects this very sacred place. In this photograph, I used the frame to enclose a small portion of the scene, chopping that soldier so that I could just see his lower legs and his firearm. Believe it or not, the little girl who was standing next to this fellow, who you didn't see in the first picture, was there when I made that first photograph. I just shifted my angle a little bit to the left, and of course I created a frame that was a little bit bigger, and now I've created a picture that has a couple of facts. Rather than just the fact of the soldier and his firearm, who you might not have known that that was a soldier in the first picture. You might have thought maybe in the United States, if you go to a circus, you might see somebody with shoes like that, kind of big on the tips. But they're a very formal soldierly shoe there in Greece. Now here, we've got two facts together, the child's legs and the soldier's legs. And comparisons of size, comparisons of purpose, comparisons of types of people. We've got two facts and we're forming a relationship, and that's an essential aspect of what we can do with the frame. Create a relationship between things because we've chosen to frame them together. In this picture, I took a slightly different vantage point and a different approach to the frame, and the little girl had run off, and I've made a picture now framing the soldier along with the space behind him, which happened to be occupied by a number of pigeons. The pigeons were hiding in the shadows behind him in the near background, and then there were pigeons sitting on the stairs and on the wire separating the stairs from the space in the background as well. We get new content anytime we have a new set of elements that we contrast one with another. In this picture, for me, there's a little bit of mystery, a little bit of humor. I like the way the birds seem to be posing, and I like the way that the soldier's pose maintains the same rigid stance from the previous pictures. While that first photograph that I showed you was what we would call a very symmetrical composition, this third photograph, with the pigeons, is what we would call an asymmetrical composition. And that's another thing that we affect when we choose our framing. Framing has an important role to play in determining the final composition. To most viewers, it will appear that both photographs are what we would call well-balanced. Well, what's a balanced composition? A balanced composition is one in which it appears that the entire scene has a purpose, and that the interlocking elements of that scene make a single statement, and that the viewer feels that they're going down a path that's been created for them. Certainly that symmetrical composition with about equal amounts of space on the left and the right, that feels balanced to most people. And in the second picture, the asymmetrical composition feels balanced also. It has to do with visual weight or interest. We're very interested in the soldier, but we're also very interested in the birds, and they balance each other out. We'll talk a lot about composition as we go further into the course, and in fact we'll talk about composition throughout the whole specialization. It's that important. Here I moved a little bit further away from the soldiers so that now they're fully seen in all their glory, 3 of them this time, in the foreground. We've also got a background relationship here, and this is a key element that the frame affects also. It's a very symmetrical composition, balanced evenly with similar visual elements on the left and the right. But look at that foreground-background relationship. We call that positive and negative space. This picture also shows how the frame can be used to make the viewer pay attention more to one area in the space than another. Normally, that space that most people pay attention to is what they think is foreground element. And in this case, it's that single isolated soldier. Looking at him and looking at the array of space around him, that negative space is playing an important content role on its own. The soldier is playing an important role on his own. And we have this positive and negative space interplay. What's the balance going to be between the relative interests in both of them? How much is one thing seen to be surrounding another, and how much is it 2 different contents that are interacting? That's a real important question for you in framing your pictures. Do you recognize the elements in this picture? Did you notice them in some of the photographs I've just finished showing you? Maybe not, because this was very far in the distance. What this is a portion of the stone relief that was in the wall in the background of the previous 2 photographs. The frame we used in this picture is quite much more restricted, and it brings together 2 very different facts. I was really blown away as I zoomed my lens in, and I realized that there was actually not a pigeon, but a dove sitting in the corner of this sculptural frieze depicting a fallen soldier. We've got a frame within a frame, this frame being within the previous 2 photographs, but it's only visible if we decide to further frame it in. Whenever you're attracted to a composition, whenever you're attracted to a scene, well, go ahead and make that picture, but also look for frames within that frame that can maybe excite you even further.